The starting LG light machine gun that comes with the heavy gunner kit certainly is no showstopper, but the 50-round drum boasts sustained firepower, and with the class's specialization that adds passive plating with every connected shot, sustained fire is key. The moment before combat has the ominous terror of anticipation, the discomfort when encountering a sadist. For when the violence starts, the player knows that, eventually, the light machine gun will not be enough, and responding with continuous fire will build heat, risking a breakthrough that is orgasmic and wretched, that will melt your soldier's wax wings. The enemies will overwhelm you, and the amount of required actions will paralyze you into a psychotic break. That is the beauty of Synthetic 2. Here you're witnessing a run of the first floor of the isometric action shooter slowed down 5 times. In order to prevent the digitization and fragmenting of the sound, I detached the audio and slowed it down manually using a tool called Paul's Extreme Sound Stretch that I've been using for over a decade to create deep and resonating sounds of slowed down music. Here the results are nightmarish. The sequel to Synthetic 1, Synthetic 2 breaks out of the flat top-down perspective for a more three-dimensional perspective with greater depth. That's good, because once the action begins, you'll need all the help you can get to PID targets. Bullets fire frenetically with ricochets and spalling. Robots fly apart, dismember, and ragdoll. Explosions rock the screen. Hell, reloading rocks the screen. Most of the guns sound like a 747 just plowed into your home, and with up to 4-player co-op, the promise of losing yourself in the combat might be taken, for better and for worse, quite literally. Everyone in early 2024 was talking about another 4-player shooter, Helldivers 2. All I could think about was Synthetic 2. The difference has to do with the skill ceiling. While both games have you losing ammo when you reload, it's the latter that makes you press 3 separate keys to reload: E to eject the mag, R to replace the mag, and spacebar to lock and fucking load. If you time the spacebar right, you'll achieve an active reload, promising more damage. Easier said than done when the bullets start flying. You also control your person, one of many classes, each one playing erratically different. Accuracy is key with a reticle that changes damage depending on what part of the enemy you target and how much you move while shooting. Enemies have weak points and can usually be flanked, so one player pulls targets while the other aims for the kill. Clever girl. In this roguelike action setting, each weapon you pick up, each item behaves differently. Many have strictly benefits, but some have trade-offs. By the second or third floor of a run, you'll need to keep track of several features of your character, while also activating your class abilities as often as possible. The fundamental difference between the skill ceiling between Helldivers 2 and Synthetic 2 is that Synthetic 2 relies on the need for a preponderance of violence. There's a pacing and tempo to Synthetic 2, at least at first. After several rooms in this roguelike packaging, the amount of enemies can produce incredible fights of attrition. The rooms never remove bodies or blood, which creates an amazing tapestry that is blasted like a Jackson Pollock painting. Synthetic 2 wants you to learn on its own terms. Enemies are aggressive, and their armor is front-facing. If a player wants to maximize their damage, mobility is the key. And yet, mobility comes at some significant costs. If the player moves, the reticle responds, so there's rarely a chance for spray and pray shooting. The enemy will suppress a position, which makes pop shooting like some kind of time crisis experience difficult. Flanking does give you a brief advantage, but the enemy will split and focus on both sections. If a player stays in one place for too long, enemies may pepper the position with indirect fire from grenades and mortars. Stationary turrets, and launchers will follow a player's movement, increasing the danger of staying out in the open. All of this occurs in lightning-fast exchanges, hence the slowdown here. You hardly have time to consciously prepare your mind. This makes co-op a strange proposition. Unlike Helldivers 2, which features a slower-paced experience with lower lows and lower highs, players can communicate effectively enough on how to handle certain situations. Synthetic 2 plays more like a pit crew, where friends must inevitably come to terms with their comrades in near total silence. And yet, because of Synthetic 2's mechanics, particularly the necessity of flanking, much like Helldiver 2's armor system, the case can be made that co-op offers particular advantages that should be taken advantage of. The questions for prospective buyers is in the pace, the aesthetic packaging, and that difference in conscious decision-making with unconscious intuition. Ever since John Wick first appeared on the big screen, the question has become what video game labels itself as a John Wick simulator. This is obviously because John Wick strikes us as a video game caught in the trappings of a film. The world building, the lore of the Continental, the fetch quests, the set pieces that test Wick's abilities in each level that spans first New York, then the globe. And since then, there have been games like Superhot VR that come close to achieving the top spot of earning the affection we have for Keanu Reeves. And by John Wick Chapter 4, the filmmakers have leaned so far into this comparison that we get a top-down set piece of John Wick firing inflammatory rounds, much like we see here in Synthetic 2. But films can only go so far. Oftentimes what is missing is the combination of finesse and technical flourish that combines with brutal ferocity. If any game can come close to that description, it is Synthetic 2. While Helldivers 2 feels frenetic, visceral, overwhelming, a John Wick simulator must feel clean, violent, responsive, and difficult. Only Synthetic 2 manages all of the features in such a cohesive package. Released originally in early access in November 2021, at the time of recording, they've just released their 14th major update. I think the game is easily worth its asking price. We can now only expect it to get better with time. Like Hyperdemon, like John Wick, this is a game that relies on your sheer fucking will. 80% of your improvement in this game will come from you, while the other 20% is leveraging a, thus far, threadbare progression system. However, I also happen to know that the developers are actively working for more outgame meta progression that may veer these percentages closer to progression than to increasing skill. For now, I view the game very much as a roguelike, because while yes, there are levels, more progression happens within one level in the form of weapons, items, and upgrades than occurs outside of the game. The absolute best thing that Synthetic 2 has is its ferocity, and I think one can easily see that this is already in place. Thanks for watching.